Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast. I am your host Luke, as per usual, and I hope you're all well, as per usual. Today we're going to be talking about a movie, going to be a bit of a movie review for you. The movie that I'm going to be talking about is The Amazing Maurice on Sky Cinema. This isn't an advertisement, by the way, that's just who make it. But before I get into that, one thing I do want to say is make sure that you follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. And if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and all that jazz. All the boring stuff out of the way now. So, like I said, we're going to talk about The Amazing Maurice today. But before we do, give you a bit of a story time. So, drum roll. Story time! I need to get a drum roll for that. It'd be so much easier than having to bang my hands on the table. Anyway, so The Amazing Maurice, or as it is known in book form, it is called I always get it wrong, so I had to write it down. It is called The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents. It is book 58 in the Discworld series, by Sir Terry Pratchett, one of my favourite authors. I've spit lyrical. Did I really just say that? Yes, I did. I'm going to keep going. I've said many times how much of a big fan I am of Terry Pratchett and his work, and how much I'm a fan of the Discworld. So when I found out this movie was being made, I was really, really excited, mainly because, like I said, it's Terry Pratchett. Now, I have since, before watching this movie and before after I found out this movie was being made, I have since watched the Colour of Magic TV. What's not TV? Like TV special they did on Sky One back in the early 2000s, with David Jason as Rincewind and Sean Astin, who played Samwise Gamgee as Two Flower. I watched that. That was absolutely really, really incredible. A lot of fun. Reminded me of very much of the TV show, of the books. It was a really good telling, and Terry Pratchett was in it. And obviously, Terry Pratchett does a fantastic job. Even though he's not in it for long, he just does a fantastic job. And also for us read the books, it's like a kind of like that meme of what's his name now, Leonardo DiCaprio, where he's like, I can't do the one time I need to whistle, I can't whistle. That thing when he's clicking his fingers. Oh yeah, look, and he's looking at the TV. And he goes, yeah, that meme, right? That's that moment of like, look, there he is. So Terry Pratchett. So that kind of made me smile. So I've watched that. I've watched the part 1, part 2. And also for Christmas, me and my brother, we sat and we watched The Hogfather. Now, if anybody doesn't know what The Hogfather is basically the Discworld version of Christmas. And that he comes, and he's basically the same as Santa, really. The only difference is that he is half man, half hog, really. Half Timon. Or was that half Pumba, basically. But I watched that. I loved it. I've also seen Going Postal, the TV show. That was really good. To be honest, I remember watching it and not realising it had anything to do with Terry Pratchett, and I wanted like a season 2, and then found out that it was based off a book, and I was like, oh god, I would really love more of this show. But I've seen all of them, so I was looking forward to seeing what they actually did with The Amazing Maurice in terms of animated. But before I watched the film, I wanted to read the book, and obviously anybody who listened to my Discworld episode about where to begin, Discworld for Beginners, which you haven't, go back and check it out. It's in season 1. It's absolutely an amazing in-depth episode. But basically, I go into depth and basically not just talk about where to begin in the Discworld, but also I let everybody know why and where I am on the Discworld. So basically, the long and short of it, I'm reading all the Discworld books in chronological order, which means whenever they were published, and wherever they fit inside the story, mainly because I want to get the full sort of feeling of the Discworld as it evolves, as the characters change, as they grow, as Terry Pratchett kind of figured out who the characters were, how he wanted them to sound and feel, and that sort of thing. So as the world evolved and as the writing evolved, so does the Discworld, and I wanted to see that evolution. And so far, I haven't been disappointed. It's been a fantastic ride. It's like a roller coaster, but just keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and hasn't yet fallen, which is fantastic. I love the suspense. I love it. So let's think. Actually, I've got the dates here. I think I've written them down, or they might be saved on Goodreads. So I started this book, The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents, on the 7th of September 2022, and I finished it on September the 16th, 2022. I actually wrote a review, and you know what? I'm going to read the review for you. This is my thoughts and feelings. Right, this is my review of that book. Right, so it goes like this. Actually, tell you what, I'll read the synopsis first that I did, and then I read the review. So this is a synopsis. Maurice and the rats have teamed up with a young lad named Keith to implant a clever money-making scheme. Upon entering a town, the rats make a general nuisance of themselves, stealing food and whittling on things until the townsfolk become desperate to get rid of them. Then Maurice and Keith appear on the scene and offer to save the day by ridding the town of its infestation for a small fee. So that's the synopsis. That's to give you a basic idea of what the story's about. As my review, there's no spoilers in this, by the way. There's no spoilers at all, so you ain't gotta worry. So, my review, I put, this lovely little story is meant to be for kids, but I'm not so sure about that, as this book gets a bit creepy at times. Really spooky, with Pennywise moments with the Rat King, and the themes that feature in this book completely surprised me for a kid's story. But I loved it. At times, it had me thinking that if Pratchett wrote horror, he would have been magnificent at it, which, again, he really, really would have. Sadly, he never did, but I think he would have done a fantastic job. Anyway, this story follows Maurice, a cat that has been spending too much time around the rats that lived in the Unseen University, as some of that magic has worn off on him and how he speaks and is too smart for his own good. The rats are too clever for a normal life of whittling on everything and going through bins, so they join together to hustle people out of their money by faking an infestation of rats in a small town, so that they can use their boy, Keith, to pretend to be a Pied Piper to lead the rats out of town for money, until they run into more scam artists and things go not according to plan. This story is pretty amazing. As I said, it didn't feel like a kid's story at times, but small and contained enough to be enjoyed by children. The magic of Pratchett is here in full, and I say jump in and enjoy no matter your age. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars and a 95 out of 100 ginger points, because I'm sad. But as you can see, I really, really enjoyed myself with the book. It's an interesting story. You have Maurice, who is basically a Dell boy. He's a swindler. You know, he's a snake oil salesman. He basically goes into the town, swindles people out of their money, basically making them think that there is a plague, that there's a rat infestation. So then they hire Keith, who is the Pied Piper, to fool the people into thinking that he has made the rats leave. So he will play his flute. The rats will then get up, follow him, and then he will basically lead them to a river, which they will climb in the river and so forth, drowned. And then, you know, Keith would get the money, and then they would leave the town, and then Keith would give the money to Maurice, because Maurice is the big cheese, pardon the pun. And yeah, and that's basically the story, and it goes from there. And again, they go to another town, and that's when sort of the twist and everything starts to occur. But I really, really enjoyed myself with it, because I knew they was making a film, and I won't lie, I quickly rushed through a lot of the other Pratchett stories just to get to this one, so I could get to it get to the movie in time. And I'll talk more into when we get into the review, but they did a good job of actually converging the stories. Like, they did a good job of actually showing the story and not changing things. You know, a good sort of translation from page to screen. And I feel like the live action Terry Pratchett is fantastic, and they've done it an incredible job each time they've done it. But again, it's that same thing of fact of there's still more that you can do with animation. You can do more in animation than you can do with live action, and it's cheaper and it's easier, and you can go as much as big and bombastic as you want. And they do here, and I feel like after watching this, I would like them to adapt a lot more stories. Eric, I like the short story Rincewind and the young sorcerer named Eric. I'd like that one to be done, but also one of my favorite short stories not short stories, but one of my favorite sort of like side stories that Terry Pratchett wrote was actually Small Gods. That would be a fantastic animated movie for kids to make, or even animated movie in general. So I feel like there's a lot of potential for more Terry Pratchett stories to be told in animated form. It's just that if this movie's successful, they might do more. So I hope that it does get successful. And with this review, it's kind of hoping that enough people listen to the review and I convince them, and then you go check it out. But before I get onto the review, I just want to say that I'm currently the next Discworld book I've got to read is The Science of Discworld, The Globe, which is part of the Science of Discworld trilogy. To give you a rundown of that, it's real world science mixed in with the Discworld. In the first The Science of Discworld book, the Wizards of Unseen University basically make a computer called Hex by Pondus. It's not Pondus. I think it's Pondus. No, it's not Pondus Stibbins. I think it's Stibbins. One of the wizards, anyway, basically makes a computer, and while doing it, accidentally creates Earth. Well, they create the universe technically, but within the universe, they accidentally create the planet Earth, and they kind of use the world of use the characters and the lore of Discworld and how the Discworld works and the lore of magic and that sort of thing of the Discworld, and to tell real world science. So it's kind of like a science book, but made interesting and made fun. This book, the second book, which I haven't read yet, but from reading the blurb, it's basically they've discovered Earth. But as they've discovered it, they've also finally discovered there are actually people living on it, humans. But the only downside is they finally discovered humans, but now humans are infected with a plague, i.e., elves. And anybody who's read any of the Discworld books knows that elves are bad news for the Discworld. They're not good at all. I think it's called. I think the story Witches Abroad. I think it was Witches Abroad or Weird Sisters. One of those ones deals with elves in that one, and that'll explain it. But elves are bad news in terms of the Discworld. So I haven't read it yet, but I would imagine that the Wizards of Unseen University have to try and figure out not just humans, but also figure out how to get rid of elves and how they've infested Earth. So that should be a fun one to do. Then after that, I think the next one in the Discworld series, if I go into Goodreads and have a look, oh god, I'm on my tablet and my tablet's playing up on me. So the next one in the Discworld series after this one is, hold on, for some unknown reason my internet's just died and killed itself. Come on, internet, back on. There we go. Load, 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 load. Here we go. So let me scroll down. So the 29th book for me to read is The Night Watch, which is book 6 in the Ankh-Morpork City Watch series, which is to do with Corporal Kara, Captain Vimes and Nobby Nobs and Detritus and all that. So I look forward to going back to my guards, because I love the guards of Ankh-Morpork. They just my favourite, especially like when I watched The Hogfather and Nobby Nobs appears, and it's just lovely. It's just fantastic. It's just nice to see these characters that I'm so enthralled with, and I'm so sort of in love with, that it's just nice to see them in a real world setting. Even in animated, like some characters appear in the animated series, that's really warms my heart. It was really nice to see. As for the movie itself, we'll get on to that now. We'll have a quick break and then we'll go straight into the review. All right, I'll see you in the review, guys. So on to the review. So the Amazing Maurice, that's what it's called. They didn't call it the Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents. They just called it the Amazing Maurice, because technically Maurice is the main character of the story, really. Even though you have the other sort of rats in it as well, Maurice is kind of the main character in this story. But I had a star-studded cast for this film, and to be honest, I'm kind of amazed now looking at the cast, because I'm sure that Helena Bonham Carter was in this movie, but apparently the person that I thought she was playing was actually played by Emilia Clarke. So that really amazes me, really, because she does a really good. She sounds like Helena Bonham Carter in the movie, and if I hadn't read this, I would have thought she was. But so we've got Emilia Clarke is Amicia. You've got Hugh Laurie, who's playing Maurice. You've got David Thewlis is Boss Man, or the Rat King. You got Hugh Bonneville as the mayor, David Tennant as Dangerous Beans, Hamish Patel is Keith, Joe Sugg as Sardines. You've got Gemma Arterton, is Peaches. Peter Serafinishwich is Death. Rob Brydon is the Pied Piper. We have Julia Athon as Nourishing. And that is your cast. As for the story, like I said, the story follows very much on from the book. It follows almost perfectly from the book, to be honest. You would think it was basically if you've read the book, it's a complete carbon copy. I won't go into spoilers, but as I mentioned in the introduction, Maurice is a Del boy. He's a swindler. There is a twist behind Maurice, but Maurice basically can talk, and I won't go into how he can talk or why he can talk because that's kind of a huge crux of the story. But Maurice can talk, and so can the rats that he's ganged up with. The reason the rats can talk is because the rats used to hang around the Unseen University. And the wizards being the wizards, which you do get appearance by the wizards in this, which only for a little bit, but again made me smile just to see the wizards. One of the wizards actually looks like Rincewind, and I would like to think it is Rincewind. It's never mentioned, but I'd like to think it was Rincewind, because this seems like something Rincewind would do. But basically, because the wizards are basically... The wizards they're very smart, but they're very lazy at the same time. So what they do, a way of getting rid of their rubbish, is they just open up portals to different areas, different dimensions, and they just throw their rubbish into other areas. Like if it's not there, then it's not there. You know what I mean? It's not something to pay attention to. So basically, the Unseen University has a dumping ground for all magical things, magical potions, magical spell books. And in the disc world, any sort of book, if it's be a spell book or any normal book, has power. And any old spell books lying around that are open, so that could be read, which is a bad thing because any book that's open to be read can, change the world and that sort of thing. Obviously, Terry Pratchett had a really fun and interesting way of explaining things, and another reason why I love his books. And why books are so dangerous. And they are dangerous. People just miscredit them. People just take them for granted. But books are incredibly dangerous things if in the wrong hands. But the basic premise behind this story, though, because I'm going off on tandems, mainly because I'm just gushing over Terry Pratchett at the moment. But to keep it on track, is that because the rats were living around the Unseen University, and because they were eating the potion, drinking the potions, and eating bits of magic pages that they shouldn't be eating, that one day they kind of gain sentience, really. And trying to best how to explain so I go into spoilers. They basically gain sentience, and from then they ended up meeting Maurice, and Maurice basically being a cat around people and knowing how people are and being quite clever as cats are, he realised that money's important. Even though he didn't know why money was important, he just knew that money was important and that he should have some. So he basically struck up a deal with the rats, and basically he said, I will run everything. I will be the Del Boy. I'll be the leader. All you need to do is to go into these little towns, these little villages, make a bit of a mess, make a bit of a fuss, whittle everywhere. Which, if you're not from England, basically whittling is peeing everywhere, and just make a nuisance. Be an issue, be a problem. And people come in, think there's a plague, there's loads of rats there. So then Maurice comes in with the Pied Piper. Obviously, Maurice doesn't talk, and nobody really knows he's talking. Only neither Keith and the other rats know that Maurice can talk. But Maurice will come in with his boy, Keith. Keith will come in, play the Pied Piper. People will then go, oh, well, you got rid of the rats, thank you. Here's some money. The money will then go to Keith. Then they leave the town. They meet the rats, say, like downstream. If the rats, jumped into a river and drowned themselves, they'll meet downstream. And then they would collect the money, and then the money would go to Maurice. Now, the whole reason behind this money is because the rodents, or shall we say rats, have this idea and belief in their mind of this place called paradise. That there's another place where animals can talk, and they live among humans, and they wear dresses and they wear clothes and hats, and they're civilized, and there's no sort of killing, there's no fear of rats and humans. Like rats and humans basically live together in harmony. So they have this idea of, and basically Maurice has lied to the rats and basically said, "Oh yeah, you do all these jobs for me. That all the money that we make, we can use it to find this paradise, this island." And obviously he's roped in Keith as well. Keith being an author, he's roped Keith in as well to basically be this Pied Piper. And Keith, in the books, he's not dumb, but again, he's not the sharpest pencil in the case, shall we say? So he just goes along with it because again, he doesn't have a family. He's an orphan. Might as well. It gives him something to do, and he's pretty good at the flute, so it allows him to play the flute. And that's basically the premise of the story from the books, and the show follows it quite well, really, really well, in fact. They obviously miss a few things here and there for longevity because, like I said, each page of a book is a minute on screen. So you have to think of, a book's like, say, an average book is like 300 pages. That's 300 minutes. That's longer than, that's really, really long film. So they have to condense things, they have to take things out. Like, for example, one thing I can think off the top of my head is in the book, there's a moment where they're going from one town to the big town where the story starts to take place. And they're in this carriage, and Maurice is talking to Keith, and he's talking to the other rats about their plans and what they're going to do when they get there. And then it cuts to, in the same carriage, you have other people in that carriage basically looking around like, is that cat can talk? And then Morris is like, of course I can't. Cats can't talk. And then people go, yeah, he can't talk. I'm sure he can't talk. Oh, a second, didn't he just talk? So again, more Terry Pratchettness. I love it. Fantastic. But for one in terms of story, it works fantastically. Like I said, they move here through things here and there, but absolutely the story is told perfectly here. And again, I would say even if you've not read the book, you'd still enjoy your time 100%. As for the characters, as I mentioned, the actors that play the characters, Hugh Laurie does a fantastic job as Maurice, or I call him Morris. I was always saying Morris, but actually he makes a point in the show is where, because Peach is one of the rats, basically keeps calling him Morris, and he's like, no, it's Maurice. He keeps doing it, and Peaches is like, okay, Morris, and it really gets on his nerves. And I'm quite easy to please, and obviously I like the Discworld anyway, so these small little things kind of just make me smile. Emilia Clarke does a fantastic job as Amicia Grimm. Basically, anybody recognize that last name? The way it is in the book, and obviously in the show, it's not really talked about mostly in the film, but in the book, Milicia has, I think it's because in real world it's called the Brothers Grimm. I think if I remember correctly in the Discworld, I think it's called the Sisters Grimm. It's the same sort of concept. They write stories and they write sort of the fairy tales and the twisted fairy tales like the Brothers Grimm does. But in the film, it doesn't really go into that. It just says she just tells them a name, and obviously, if you read the book or you know the Brothers Grimm, you can probably sort of go from there and sort of make your own mind up. But one thing that I love is that how they've really portrayed her character. Because in the book, she's a girl who is most basically a bookworm. She is somebody who lives in a fantasy world that everything is the beginning of an adventure. Everybody is a hero and everybody is a villain, and that you get somebody who is not a hero, who is a commoner, who say was an orphan, and that they grow up to become a hero. And there's a really lovely moment, and it's a fantastic quote in the book, and I think I'm going to butcher the quote. I should have wrote the quote down. But the basic is that Keith is by the time this comes up in the story in the film, Keith has had enough of her sort of fanciful ways of thinking, the fanciful ways of teaching their situation that they're in as a fairy tale, as a story. And Keith's trying to say to her, like, why are you treating everything like a story? This is not a story. This is real life. Like, people are in danger. This is not a game. And she basically blurts out and she says to him, like, if you don't write your own story, if you're not the center of your own story, then somebody will make you the center of theirs. Somebody will write your story for you. I think I butchered that quote, but the basic premise is, if you don't take charge of your own life, someone's going to write that life for you, and someone's going to choose the narrative, and you won't get a choice. Then you're stuck on that narrative. It's a beautiful quote. It's a fantastic quote. But I just love how it's handled here, and it's delivered really, really well. So her character's done well. Again, Bossman, who is the Rat King, who is David, who's played by David. I always butcher his last name, Flores, who basically plays Professor Lupin in Harry Potter. If anybody wants a visual sort of impression who that character is, he does a fantastic job. He has such a fantastic voice that he always does a good job for the bad guy. Absolutely amazing job. David Tennant's in this as well as Dangerous Beans, as basically I like to think of him as the sage, has the sort of not prophet. Trying to think of like a not a vicar. Somebody's like a vicar. Somebody's like the Pope, but not somebody like the Moses sort of thing of the rats. Basically, he is the leader, but not leader of the rats. Basically, he's the kind of like he spoke gospel really, like we will go to the place of paradise and that life will be good and life will be this, and once we get there things will be better than it is here, and Maurice is right, Maurice knows what he's doing. So he's very much the voice of hope really in this thing, and David Tennant is a fantastic grab. Again, David Tennant always does a fantastic job whether he's on screen or he's doing a voice, so he does a fantastic job. Hamish Patel does a fantastic job as Keith. All the rats are amazing. Sardines, Peaches, I love it. Death does appear in this story. He doesn't appear till the end, well, the end-ish. But again, I love Death. Every time I've said this many times. Whenever Death appears, in no matter what concept or if he's there for a long time or he's there for a short time, whenever I hear like hello, I instantly get chills and I'm giddy and I'm happy and I'm full of smiles, because Death is one of my favorite characters in the Discworld, and he's just a joy. I know it's weird to say that about Death, but generally Death is one of my favorite characters. And one of my other favorite characters next to Death is the Death of Rats, and I've spoke on nauseam about the Death of Rats many times. How much, again, same thing. Whenever the Death of Rats appears, he's so cute. But again, he's a dead rat. He's a skeleton. He's a skeleton of a rat in a little cloak. But he's so small and cute, and it's just it's lovely. And I remember I watched Hogfather for Christmas, and then I got to see a live action sort of realistic version of what the Death of Rats would look like. And again, so cute, so lovely. Like generally, I wish I could see him. Like I wish the Death, like even if Death doesn't exist, well, we know Death does exist, but I mean like the character, the Grim Reaper, whatever you want to call him. Even if that exists or not, we don't know. I haven't died yet. But I'd like to think there was a Death of Rats, and if I ever got to see him, I think I would just want to sort of hug him, even though he's a Death of Rats and all he does is squeak, squeak. I love it. He's just cute. But the Death of Rats appears, as you'd imagine, dead rats. He's going to appear because, again, he is the death of them. But like Death does take a sort of come up eventually, and again it's just a small role. It's not really that big, but again it's lovely to see. And I just like it whenever he appears. It's nice. So the cast and the characters are all fantastic, and I'm glad they managed to represent each character properly. That's one of my main worries whenever they adapt a book into a movie or animated or film or TV show, that the adaptation never does the characters justice, and that's always my worry. And here I can happily say 100% they do each one of the characters justice, each one of the rats. Now in the book, more of the rats have names and more of the rats talk, but obviously for time's sake and to kind of lessen the chance of confusion for the audience, primarily kids, only a few of the rats talk, like Sardines and Peaches and Dangerous Beans and that sort of thing. But all the names of the rats are still the same. There is one section of when they get into the new town and they're in the sewers, and Sardines basically goes, is it not Sardines? It's the leader, the big brute guy. What's his name? Oh, let me if I wrote it down. I can't remember what got his name. But I think it's Neomat. One of the sort of rats. Basically, he's the big boss man rat, and basically he goes, okay, half price and best before, you go this way, because basically all the rats are named after things that they could find, because as they were getting smarter, as they were starting to kind of gain intelligence. They were just reading things that they found in the dump. So that's why some of them are named peaches. That's why some of them are named sardines, because that's what they found in the rubbish was sardine tins and peach tins and half off, like bits of paper that said half price and that sort of thing. And so again, it all works quite well, and it's quite funny and quite sort. It makes me smile. And this was a fantastic idea, I think, in total, just to kind of do this story for kids, because it's a kids story, but it also has sort of tones in there that the adults can enjoy as well. So my overall feelings of this movie, like it's not going to be a long review. That's why the story time was quite long, because I wanted to talk about that more, because I knew the review weren't going to be that long. But overall, as my thoughts and feelings of this is absolutely fantastic. It's frankly amazing what they managed to do here, how they managed to tell the story. They managed to adapt the story in such a fantastic way, in the correct way. All the characters were done well, all the story bits, the twists at the end all made sense, all worked. Even though I knew the twists were already coming, they were done in such a way that if I didn't know, I would be shocked. You know what I mean? So I still enjoyed myself. It's a delightful watch. It's great for kids. It's great for adults. It's great for Terry Pratchett fans. It's great for fans that have never read anything or don't know anything about Terry Pratchett. This is their first time going in. This is their first time completely. Like, one of the things that I love, and again, this is something that one of those mediums that you could do in film, but you couldn't. You could do in a book, but it's different. Whereas in the film, they have the stories being told to you by um, Milicia, Amicia. Well, basically, she tells the story. She's the narrator, but she's also a character in the story. And they also use another story called Mr. Bunsy's Grand Adventure to also tell the story. I know it's quite confusing, but trust me, it makes sense on screen. Whereas Amicia would tell the story of what's going to happen in the setup, because again, she lives in the fantasy world. Her whole world and her whole reality is very storytelling and fanciful and all that kind of thing. So she narrates the story. Then there are moments that happened in a storybook within the film, Mr. Bunsy's Grand Adventure, which also sets up for what's going to happen next in the next scene of the story. And then there's a moment where Maurice kind of looks into the camera and sort of talks to the audience, narrates what's going to happen next and that sort of thing. So it's done in a very clever sort of way, and I like that change. I like that difference. Like I've done many reviews of movies and films that were books that have been made into films, and I've spoken many times how they always miss the mark, or they never quite get it right in terms of characters, in terms of story, in terms of tone, but all it's done well. And as I mentioned in my review, and as I said, this book, even though it's made for kids, even though it's written for kids, and it's very silly and it's very sort of childish, it also has dark undertones. And I was kind of worried the fact of when I saw this movie being made, I was worried, especially more so when I read the book, obviously. I was worried that they were going to take those dark undertones out, because there are quite scary moments with the Rat King and the whole scary moments between sort of how that all works. Because again, that's the moment I mean when I say Pennywise. I mean that moment in the book. It's quite creepy, quite spooky, quite scary. You know, the sort of interactions between Dangerous Beans and the Rat King. It's all very Pennywisey, very scary, very creepy, very dark. So I was kind of wondering if they were going to go that route, and not overly enough where it's too scary for the kids, but enough where it sets the tension. Like it does it in such a way where it's creepy, where it's spooky, where it shows you that this Rat King, this entity, whatever it is dangerous, is quite scary, is quite spooky, and is bad, is evil. And it does a really good job of conveying that by not being too scary. Again, I love it, and I do stand by what I said. If Terry Pratchett was to have written a horror story, as far as I know, I don't think he did. I hope I'm wrong, because if I am wrong, I'd love to read that story. But as far as I know, he didn't write a horror story. But if he had, I think he would have been very good at writing horror. I really, really do, and I think he probably would have gave Stephen King and even James Herbert, definitely James Herbert, a run for his money, both of their monies really. But again, Terry Pratchett stuck to what he knew and did fantasy. But I think if he did horror, he would have done a very, very, very good job. Um, but I like the dark tones, and they didn't pull back, and the parts they did pull back was pull back enough where it still made sense and it still worked, but didn't pull back too much where it kind of neutered it completely. So overall, this movie to me is a 10 out of 10. Is a 5 out of 5. You know, it's a fantastic retelling of a classic book. All the characters are done well. The story's done well. Obviously, they've taken things out here and there to kind of for the runtime, but those things they took out were more so expose sort of bits, kind of like how to get from A to B. Well, we should fill in that gap from how we got from one city to the next. Obviously, in a movie or TV show, you don't have to show that. You can just go, we was in this city, now we're here. Like in Star Wars, we were on Tatooine, now we're on Hoth. You know, you don't need to tell the story of the whole how the conversations Luke and Han Solo. How obviously they do for context wise, but you didn't have to do it. It could just be the fact that we are now here, now we're here. You know, and that's kind of the beauty of movie making and the TV. You can just do that, but obviously in a book you can't jump. Sometimes you have to tell the story of how we got from A to B and what happened between A and B. You know, um, so again, I understand why they took certain things out, but overall, a fantastic film, absolutely fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. I don't have any kids, but if I did, I think they would enjoy it. So yeah, high remarks, high joy, fantastic, loved it. I would love well, I was about to say a sequel, but the reason I stopped is because I am very much against sequels being made where they don't need to be a sequel. Like they could, if right, if if Rihanna Pratchett, which is Terry Pratchett's daughter, if she's involved in the story, I think she was in. If I remember correctly, I think she was involved in writing this story. Um, I'm not really 100% sure about that one. I think she was, but I'm not 100% sure. But if she is involved and you want to make a sequel, I will happily go for it because as long as a Pratchett's hands are on the pen that writes the script and writes the story, then I'm fine. But if somebody who isn't a Pratchett writes it, I'm not. I don't want it. Simple as that, right? Um, and basically, that's how I feel. But what I would like instead, I would like them to do other Discworld stories. Like they don't have to do Rincewind and they don't have to do the Guards, but like it would be interesting to see like Small Gods. I love the story of Small Gods, or I would like to see the story of Pyramids, or I'd like to see the story of Eric. You know, these shorter stories or stories that kind of are in the Discworld but are not part of the overarching Discworld of the Death and Witches and the Night's Guard and that sort of thing. Um, it would be nice to kind of see those sort of stories, or you know, the Industrial Revolution sort of books, the Going Postal sort of story. That would be interesting. Or you know, Tiffany Aiken. I haven't read the Tiffany Aiken books, but I've been told they're quite fantastic YA sort of stories, young adult. Again, so you know, tell those stories. So I think if this movie does well, which it seems like it has, it's got about 85% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is you know quite good. Um, I'd like to think that if this movie does well and a lot of people see it, and hopefully this review, when it gets out and when I publish it, a lot of people listen to it and share it and that sort of thing, that I hope that it kind of gives the team behind it, the studio, the creatives and higher ups at Sky, it kind of pushes them to go, well, this movie did quite well. Let's either make a sequel or let's kind of see what other Pratchett stories we can sort of translate to animation. Because again, it's that thing of I love the live action shows they did, but again, it's the beauty of animation. You can get away with basically anything. You can do anything on a lot smaller budget than it would cost, you know, in real life. Because in real life, you have to pay everybody, and you have to get the stunt people in, and you've got to get the safety crews in, and it's just money, 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 money. Whereas if you want an explosion in an animated film, you just pay for the explosive effects and the music, which again is still money, but it's not as much money as it would be if you did it in real life. You know what I mean? So you can get away with doing a lot more. You can be a lot more sort of imaginative and a lot more sort of fanciful, because you don't have to build every set. You don't have to make every costume. You can just design it and basically as that, and that's how it is. You know what I mean? So whatever they decide to do next, I'm up for. If they don't do anything more after this, if they don't decide to translate any more Pratchett stories into animation, again, I'm fine with that. But yeah, I've basically what's happened now is that I have gotten to the point where I have scratched that itch of Terry Pratchett mediums that are not sort of book related that are now sort of TV show and now movie that I now want more. Like I've watched all the TV shows, all the specials, and the Going Postal TV show. I've now watched The Amazing Maurice. I want more. You know, it sounds greedy, but I want more. I want more animated. I want a live action movie. You know what I mean? I want TV shows, and I want more. Like I'm greedy. Like you've teased me with it, and I finally got around to watching the older stuff, and now I just want more. So if they do more, I would love it. If they don't, that's fine. But overall, that's my thoughts and feelings on The Amazing Maurice. This is not a sort of an advertisement, but if you're interested, it's on Sky One here in the UK, and or Now TV if you have Now TV. Anywhere else in the world, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm sure it'll be somewhere online, somewhere for you to watch it outside of the UK. But in the UK, you can watch it on Sky Cinema or on Now TV, and I watched it on Now TV. So that's where you can watch it if you're interested. But yeah, so that's my review for The Amazing Maurice. Hope you would liked it. Hope you enjoyed it. And on to the end now. Right, so here we are at the end. Hope you all liked it, as usual. Hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I wanted to do my first movie review of the year. I had planned to do something else. I won't say what that is because I'm still planning on doing it. I had planned to review a TV series. I watched season one. There's 3 seasons in this show. I watched season 1 on Netflix, loved it, but I found I didn't have a lot to say about it in terms of because what I was going to do. I was going to go a by season sort of plan. So I was going to watch season 1, review it, and then I was going to watch season 2, 3, and then review the series overall. The issue with that being is the fact that I didn't have a lot to say about series 1, and it would have been a waste of your time and my time just talking for like 5-10 minutes of like, I like this, I like that, I didn't like this, I didn't like that. You know what I mean? So as you know, I like to do long form content. I like to kind of make sure it's worth your while. So what I've decided to do on that front is that I'm just going to watch all 3 seasons, and then I'm going to do it as one big sort of overarching sort of review. Especially how, as the seasons went on, they made less episodes, which means that, you know, I should have more to talk about as sort of each series goes on. So at last moment, I realised that I wanted to talk about this. This movie was on my list for a lot later on, but I figured why not talk about it now? So I bumped it up. So I hope you all enjoyed my first review of 2023. Like I said, I wanted to keep this one short. I didn't want it to be as long form as usual. That's why because again, it's not a very long film, and I figured what I would do instead is for my story time, I would just talk about my love of Terry Pratchett and my first experience of reading this book and that sort of thing. And I think that would be a lot more sort of enjoyable than just talking for, you know, a few minutes about the film. So that's why the beginning was longer than review. But I hope you enjoyed it, as per usual. If you've watched the movie, please do let me know. If you've read The Amazing Maurice, he's educated rodents, again, let me know. If you like Terry Pratchett, again, basically, if you like Terry Pratchett or you want to talk about anything Terry Pratchett or the Discord or anything like that, again, by all means, let me know. But you can do that by following me on Twitter at the Nerdstalgic_pod. If you can find this podcast on Spotify, you can find me on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts, Audible. I'm on YouTube. If you are listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment and all that jazz. It really does help out a lot. I appreciate it greatly. If you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to give me a star rating between 1 to 5 stars. 5 stars, best thing you heard in your life. You want to take me out to dinner because my voice is so silky smooth. You want to bask in its ambience. 1 star, the Vogon's doing poetry, your ears are bleeding, and you just want to sort of shoot yourself. Terrible. So whatever you feel like, it's fair. 1 to 5 stars would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, so that's been me. That's been The Amazing Maurice. Try to stay clear from spoilers, because there are a few good twists in this story, and obviously you don't want them spoiled for you because they are pretty good. But I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. I have been your host, Luke, as per usual. Thank you for listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. I love you all, my fellow beans, and I will catch you in the next one. All right, beans. Bye-bye.